Welcome back to the new Yachtsman channel. Today I've got a guest, Walter Johnson, and he's got a lot of experience on the west coast of the United States and Mexico, and has done quite a bit of passage making in that part of the world as well. And I thought Walter could maybe give us a little background on what it's like boating on the west half of the U.S. Walter, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Walter Johnson. I'm president of Engel Völkers Yachting. We have four regional locations. Our headquarters is Newport Beach, California, in Corona del Mar. We have a site in Tiburon that's under construction. Will open later this summer. And then here in our Naples, Florida location where you're speaking with me now. We're also going to be opening up in Annapolis this fall. Actually, July 20th is our opening date for our Annapolis location. So we're excited about our four regional locations. But I grew up boating in Southern California. I grew up in Long Beach and spent a lot of time sailing and doing a lot of match racing out of Long Beach Yacht Club. And obviously Newport Beach is where I'm a member of Balboa Yacht Club. I'm the current director there, and enjoy boating. Done a lot of Ensenada races from Newport Beach to Ensenada, Mexico. It's an annual tradition and it's a lot of fun. And I also was blessed enough to be able to retrace Magellan's steps and sail from Newport Beach down to Acapulco to Hawaii, Hawaii to Guam, Guam to Cebu, and then bounced around the rest of the Philippine Islands till we landed in Manila. So been able to do some pretty extensive passage making and a lot of blue water sailing. So a lot of fun.
What would your advice be to the person that's a new yachtsman, has never really done a lot of overnight passage making and things like that? What's the best way to get experience doing that type of trip?
I always tell people the best way is to find someone, and there's a lot of delivery captains moving boats, and go out and experience it. It's quite a unique experience when you untie the ties and hold you back and head on out and go do some passage making when your whole life becomes the boat, and on a 24/7 basis. It's quite an adjustment for a lot of people. Some of them it's the memories of a lifetime, and others not so much. So people are always excited about those things, and I try to get them to, in Southern California, for instance, saddle up with some of the cruising groups that we have and go to Catalina for a weekend and just work their way into it, and or do a passage down to Cabo San Lucas. It's a short 4-day jaunt, and going down the coast is always a lot easier than going up. So
I find quite often that the cruising couple, the guy in the relationship seems to love the passage making and wants to do what Magellan did, and the missus not so much. Do you quite often find that the missus is flying to meet the boat?
yeah, it's obviously everyone's, the gentleman's dream to go and do this, and you have to drag the missus along and trying to make them as comfortable as possible in that environment. It's detaching from a lot of stuff that they're used to doing on a daily basis, and it's an adjustment. Some find it fantastic, and others have to work their way into it. When you're boating, I tell people it's the most green environment you can be. You're creating your own energy. Many instances, you're making your own water, and you learn that you have to conserve all of those because you only have a limited supply. And that, I think, is the biggest thing that cruising couples have to come to mind with and adjust their lifestyles too. Many are used to, a 10-minute hot shower, and I'm like, in a boating environment, you get to do that. You do it once, now you're out of water and you're out of, out of energy. So it's quite the adjustment. And I always try to work with them to set expectations and let them know what it's really like when they're making that happen.
Could you talk a little bit about the west coast of Florida and how different it is than the east coast of the U.S. cruising wise? We kind of take it for granted over here that there's a great marina every 50 miles, and every 50 miles I can check in and got a restaurant right up the road, and I think we're actually quite spoiled here in Florida and the Southeast US. And I know it's just a whole different world out there, just geography wise.
I had this last year the opportunity to do the intercoastal from Norfolk, Virginia, all the way down to West Palm Beach. And you're right, it's an amazing asset that the East Coast has, the intercoastal highway. You're right, every 30 to 50 miles, there's a great marina and restaurant to stop. The West Coast of Florida is, there's a lot of tremendous opportunities here. I think most people miss the southwest of Florida because they go to Fort Myers through the intercoastal and then they head north to go up the Mississippi, unless they want to make a jaunt to Key West. But Southwest Florida has a lot of intercoastal passages. It's mostly very shallow water, which really kind of relegates the type of motor yacht or sailboat that you're going to use. And it's unfortunate the water here is so shallow, but it's also a tremendous asset. I've never seen more people with 30-foot center consoles with their outboards that rise up and down on the transom to go and enjoy sandy beaches and secluded areas. Here in Southwest Florida by Marco, there's an island called Key Waden. And on any given weekend, you'll find 1,000 boats on the island with people just having the best times of their lives. It's a very unique boating opportunity because it's really a 30-minute boat ride from most places. And you're doing it on an intercoastal that is really like a smooth river, which is fantastic. That sort of experience doesn't exist in the West Coast of California. The West Coast of California is mostly, once you leave the harbor, it's deep water, blue water cruising. The Pacific Ocean tends to be very cold. It rarely gets above 70 degrees. You'll find pockets off of Catalina and some coastal zones where they'll get in the mid 70s during the late summer. But what you find is once you end up in the channel crossings, if you don't plan your day, it could be very windy and the spray is going to be very cold. So it changes how people go boating and the type of boating that they do and the way the boats are laid out. Here in Southwest Florida, everybody has an open cockpit design, forward seating. It's very social, open. We're bringing lots of large groups of people. West Coast of California, the boats tend to be enclosed fly bridges with the heater on versus the air conditioning. And you tend to plan the time of day in which you go boating to get around the afternoon winds. So most people if they're going to go to Catalina, they'll leave early in the morning when it's calm. And then they'll make the passage late in the afternoon because they're going with the wind and waves, so it's not so treacherous. So it's a different aspect. In Southern California, there's not much harbor hopping, even though a lot of cruising groups are trying to get people to expand their boating venue. Most people tend to stay close to the harbor. Long Beach has some great anchorages. So does Newport Beach. South of Newport Beach, Emerald Bay is a great anchorage that people love to go and use on any given time. So it's a different type of boating across each spectrum.
When you leave Southern California and you want to head south to stand in tropical water and drink a fruity drink, how far south do you have to go before you get that water that you're looking for?
The transition point really is Cedros Island. So there are, nice thing about it, the Mexican government has set it up where pretty much every 100 miles there's a new port or a port of entry that you can go and anchor, get fuel, go to a little local restaurant. So they've made it so you can day hop all the way down the Baja Peninsula down to Cabo San Lucas. And then once you're in Cabo to bounce up, it's pretty easy. Most of those are existing cities, and then to go across to Mazatlan or Puerto Vallarta or down to Acapulco is a pretty easy jaunt because there are great places to anchor along the way. But you really need to get back down the coast to Cedros Island and past Cedros before you really get into the tropical waters and great locations that are, good anchorages and places to stay.
And how far is that from, say, San Diego?
From
Wow.
San Diego, well, that's just about halfway down. So it's 700 miles from nautical miles, really, from Newport Beach, San Diego to Cabo. So it's about 250 miles south. So you would, most people will bounce to Ensenada, and then from Ensenada, they'll every 150 miles, there's a great anchorage to stay at.
And is it pretty safe in these coastal towns? Do the locals keep it pretty safe around the marinas?
Yeah, it's tremendously safe all the way around, and the locals are very mindful. They're always happy to trade trinkets for lobsters and make people feel very comfortable in their stays. You have to be careful with fuel because most of the fuel is delivered in barrels. So as long as you take precaution and make sure that you're protecting from rust fragments and water, most of the fuel is very, very good and plentiful. And every anchorage there, the local pongas and local groups are always there to be of service. There's always a local mechanic who fix minor issues. So it's, they're really understanding that it's important to protect the mariners as they go up and down the coast. So yeah, it's really a great cruising environment.
And I assume you're running your water maker most of the time. It's good, clean seawater there, so no reason not to run it.
Right, it's good, clean water all the way down. So running your water maker is perfectly fine. The water along Baja actually is pretty good to drink. It's mostly river water, well water, unlike the mainland, which always is river water. So it tends to have some parasites that it takes most of us a little bit to get used to. So I never run into any problems along the Baja coast with regards to their water because it's well water. So, and it gets, the weather going up and down is it's pretty temperate. It's always good to reach out to a weather rooter and make sure that you're going at a time where you're not going to run into a little tropical bump. We had a client recently working its way down the coast and ran into a little bit of a storm. But for the most part, once you get past Cedros, it tends to be a really nice moderate sail if you're sailing, or a moderate passage all the way down to Cabo San Lucas. And then Cabo South, it tends to get easier. So.
And it looks like, just watching the national weather, that the storms are coming off the land there, but they mostly tend to go out toward Hawaii and dissipate. So if you're not getting caught up in the beginning of the storm, that once you're south of Cabo and stuff, you're probably pretty safe most of the year.
Absolutely, yeah. It tends to, further south you go, the better you are. Unless it's late in the season, and then you just have to be mindful of something working its way up the coast. But for the most part, most of the storms, like you said, start off the land and work towards Hawaii. So, you always, the nice thing about West Coast sailing is the storms and the weather routers are able to look at weather windows that are weeks in advance, so you can plan accordingly. When something's coming. It's not like it's going to be a tropical bump like you might find in Southeast Florida that just pops up in the afternoon, and you have an hour of really, really bad weather that you need to plan yourself around.
I also get questions about going to Hawaii a lot, and I think us East Coasters take for granted how far that trip really is. And could you maybe talk a little bit about the distances and the weather, and what it's really like to go from the West Coast of the United States to Hawaii?
Sure. I mean, the trek to Hawaii is 2,250 miles. It's whether you're starting in San Francisco or you're starting in LA, the first 2 or 3 days tends to be a little bit more on the wind and cold as you're working your way out and south. From the third day on, each day the weather starts getting more pleasant until you're finally in the tropics, and then you're in the trade winds where it's blowing 15 and it's 75, and the water's in its 70s. So it's a very pleasant trip. Like anything else, you need to be aware of thunderstorms that form, and keep an eye out for, what you might end up with a temporary microburst, which can be in the 25 to 30 knot range. But for the most of the time, sailing across to Hawaii, once you get past the third day, it's a very, very pleasant trip, all the way through to Honolulu or wherever you may want to stop.
And then if you're going to keep going west, where's the next logical spot for a world cruiser to stop after Hawaii?
Yeah, well, you either go way south, or you go straight across to Guam. And the problem, what most people don't realize, when you go from Hawaii to Guam, the distance is another 3,350 miles. So it's another 1,000 miles longer. And so you have to plan a provision for that stretch. And the trek from Hawaii to Guam is just more tropical trades. It can be a very pleasant trip, unless you're going during an El Nino year, or the storm track is heading south. You just have to be mindful and make sure that your weather router's giving you good intel. But for the most part, you're looking at, as the further you get to Guam, the further south you are. If you end up too low, you end up in no wind, and it tends to be tough. But I found a lot of cruisers made it to Guam, and that was pretty much the end of their cruising dream. They didn't plan for the fact that it would take them 3 weeks to a month to traverse that period of time. And after a couple of weeks, it becomes a tough trip unless you're planned ahead and understand how it's supposed to be. On the flip side, there are people who that's just been their joy, and they have nothing but beautiful memories from it. So once you get to Guam, to get to the Philippines from there is another 1,250 miles. That's pretty easy. Cruising in the Philippines is very pleasant, beautiful islands. The people are great, and then you can just go south from there. So you have the choice of going north to Japan or going south to the South Pacific, and it's just great cruising all the way through.
What advice would you give the first-time new yachtsman as far as finding the right first boat?
I think most people buy with their heart, and it's just finding something that's going to be an all-around performer that's going to satisfy their needs. And I usually spend a lot of time with these clients, trying to match their dream and what it is that they want to do with something that's going to give them the performance and the longevity of what it is that they want to do, within their budget parameters, and just really try to work with them to set expectations and understand what life is like on the water. It's a 24/7 environment, and you've got to be mindful of where you're going, and have the proper equipment so you can look forward on what potential obstacles and issues you might run into. I always try to tell people, when you're out in the middle of the ocean, most freighters aren't looking for you. You need to be looking for them. And so if you're just proactive and mindful, you're going to have a great journey all the way through. And if you think you're running into weather, shorten sail and button down sooner than later. It's just better in the long haul.
Great. Well, really appreciate your time. I'm sure that the new yachtsmen out there found this very valuable, and really appreciate your insight on the West Coast yachting. Thanks a lot. Please like and subscribe.
I will. Thank you. Appreciate your time.